Hello everyone! If you're currently preparing for the TOEFL and have no idea what to expect on test day, please continue watching this video. We'll cover the structure of the test and go over high-scoring tips and tricks for each section. We'll start with the most basic tips and then move on to more advanced tips. If you need someone to evaluate your speaking and writing, sign up for our TOEFL course and schedule a consultation with me. I'll tell you how you'll score on the writing and speaking sections if you take the test tomorrow and what you should do differently to get a better score. Let's get started. First thing to do with any language test is to understand its format. The TOEFL consists of 4 sections: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. In fact, you're lucky to be taking the test now because in July 2023, the TOEFL was significantly shortened to make it easier to take and will now take less than 2 hours to complete. The reading section consists of 2 passages, and you will have 10 questions after each passage. In the listening section, you'll hear 3 lectures and 2 conversations. The lectures are usually a little longer, about 3 to 5 minutes, while the conversations are usually about 3 minutes. You will be given 6 questions after each lecture and 5 questions after each conversation. There are only 4 questions in the speaking section. However, this section is usually the most difficult for students. You will be given 15 to 30 seconds to prepare before each answer, and your answer will be 45 to 60 seconds long. Finally, the writing section consists of 2 tasks. One is an integrated writing task, where you will read a passage and listen to a lecture, and then you'll have 20 minutes to write a summary of what you read and heard. The second task is the writing for an academic discussion. This assignment requires you to answer a question in an online classroom discussion. You will only have 10 minutes to do this. Now that you know how the test works, let's review how it's scored and how long each section takes. The TOEFL is scored on a scale of 0 to 120 points. Each of the 4 sections receives a scale score from 0 to 30. And these scores are then added together to determine the total score. In terms of time, the reading section is approximately 35 minutes long. The listening section is approximately 36 minutes long. The speaking section is 16 minutes long, and the writing section is 30 minutes long. Your second step is to take a diagnostic TOEFL test to identify your strengths and weaknesses. You can take the free TOEFL practice test available on the ETS website. After taking the test, you'll know what your current level is and which areas need improvement. You can record your results in a spreadsheet and add new scores as you practice, so you can track your progress. The third step is to create a study plan. You should develop your daily study plan based on your weakest sections. But let me give you an example of how your preparation could be organized. Dedicate the first 2 days to working on the reading section. During this time, study the question types, complete at least 6 reading sections, analyze your mistakes, and get used to the pace of the exam. On the 3rd day, switch your focus to listening. Again, do about 5 to 6 listening sections. Get used to taking notes on a whiteboard if you are taking the test at home, or on a piece of paper if you decide to take the TOEFL at a test center, and always analyze your mistakes. Many students forget to do this, but it's a very effective way to improve your score. Another effective exercise is to listen to each recording a few times after you have completed the task, and look at the transcript at the same time. Analyze what information was necessary to answer the questions and what was added just to confuse you. Days 4 and 5 are for your writing practice. Spend 1 day on the integrated essay practice and the 2nd day on the writing for an academic discussion assignment. For the last 2 days, focus solely on the speaking section. You can find many complete TOEFL speaking sections on YouTube. It's very convenient because you can go back and watch or reread the parts you missed. Some speaking sections even come with sample answers, but not all of them are of very good quality. So I wouldn't recommend relying on them too much. This brings us to another thing: finding preparation materials and resources. After you complete the free practice test on the ETS website, you will need to find resources with many full-length tests. There are several resources you can use. Number 1, official TOEFL materials. There are many practice tests on the ETS website that you can do for accurate preparation. Number 2 is free prep platforms. My favorite free platforms right now are these two. Because they're free, the first page is in Chinese, but once you select the test, you will be redirected to a page in English. Number 3, vocabulary books. There are many vocabulary books out there, but my top picks are Barron's Essential Words for the TOEFL and 400 Must-Have Words for the TOEFL. Let's look at the structure of the TOEFL reading section. It consists of only 2 passages, each about 700 words long, and you have 10 questions after each passage. You'll have about 35 minutes to complete this section, which means you'll have about 17 minutes for each passage. This brings us to the first tip. Don't read the entire passage. Just dive right into the questions. I know this may seem like an obvious tip, but I often see videos and articles that tell you to read the passage first. There is nothing wrong with that, but you have to be a very fast reader. Otherwise, you will lose time that could have been spent answering the questions. So, start by reading the title of the passage to get the main idea, and then move on to the first question. Look at the example. You have a passage about ancient coastlines. The first question is a vocabulary question. You need to find a synonym for the word crucial. The correct answer is important. As you can see, if you know the word crucial, you will answer this question in a few seconds and move on to question 2. You don't need to read the whole paragraph to find the correct answer. Tip number 2, improve your vocabulary. As you saw in the previous example, knowing the meaning of the word makes things a lot easier. The TOEFL reading section is not only a reading test, it's also a vocabulary test. So, to improve your reading score, you should work on expanding your vocabulary. Not only will this help you answer vocabulary-based questions more effectively, but it will also help you understand passages better. Many students claim to have problems with their reading skills, but after they do a few practice tests, it turns out that their vocabulary is limited. This prevents them from scoring well in the section. For example, if you don't know the word resurgence, you might have a hard time finding the right answer because it's not so easy to guess from the context. However, if you know that resurgence means something begins to grow, develop, or become successful again, and you know synonyms for it, such as renewal, revival, and comeback, you will find answer B in no time. This brings me to tip number 3. Practice active reading. One of the most effective ways to expand your vocabulary, especially when it comes to academic vocabulary, is to read actively. There are 2 types of reading you can do. Passive reading is when you just read something for pleasure. This is usually what we recommend for elementary language learners because they need to learn to understand the main idea of the text. However, at the advanced level, active reading becomes crucial. You need to underline words you don't know, look up their definitions, write down lists of synonyms, and think of sample sentences with these words to help you remember them. Remember that TOEFL is an academic test, so it's common to receive texts on physics, astronomy, marketing, sociology, music, art, or geology. So the sooner you start doing active reading on these topics, the better. Tip number 4, master skimming, scanning, and close reading. While one part of your success on the TOEFL reading section is a large vocabulary, the second part involves these 3 reading skills. Skimming means moving quickly through a paragraph or a passage without reading every word to get the main idea or structure of the text. This is something we would do when reading news online. Scanning means looking for the right part of the text to read. For example, you have a question about seagrasses. This means that you need to find this word in the paragraph. So, scanning would involve looking for that word, identify the right sentence, and then reading carefully to find the answer. You will need this technique for many types of questions, such as factual information and negative factual information questions. However, the most important reading skill is what we call close reading. Many students forget this and only skim and scan, which often results in low scores. For example, take a look at this type of question. It's called a sentence simplification question. To answer this question, you have to read the given sentence carefully, break it down into several main ideas, understand its meaning, and then find a sentence that has essentially the same meaning. You will never be able to answer it correctly if you just look for the keywords. Tip number 5, focus on keywords and synonyms. It's important to pay close attention to keywords because many question types in the TOEFL reading section require you to identify them. In order to find the correct answers quickly, you need to look for keywords in the questions themselves, in the answer choices, and in the passage. This will also help you save time and get through the questions more quickly. You should also be aware of the importance of synonyms and paraphrases in the TOEFL reading section. Some names, such as seagrass, are unlikely to change, while if your keywords are words like impact, decline, or importance, you should expect their synonyms or paraphrases. Tip number 6, time management. You have a limited amount of time to complete the entire section, so use your time wisely. Don't spend too much time on any one question. If you're not sure, mark it and come back to it later. Unlike the listening section, you can navigate freely between questions in this section. So if you skip a question or two, you can always come back to it later. As you practice, time yourself and see how much time you spend on each question. Tip number 7, guess the meaning of words from context. No matter how good a reader you are or how many words you know, you will always encounter some words that are new to you, and that's okay. The reading section tests your understanding of academic texts and articles, so it's natural that even native speakers won't know all of these words. When you read a text about astrophysics in your native language, you will also see some words you don't know. And that's okay. So don't panic if you don't know some words, or even many of them. Instead, focus on the words you do know and try to guess the meaning of other words from context. Tip number 8, familiarize yourself with the question types. Becoming familiar with the different types of questions will save you time and will also help you approach each question strategically. You will not need to read the instructions for each question, and you can spend this time on finding the right answer. So, after taking a few full-length reading practice tests, go through all the question types and learn the strategies for each one. This is what we teach you in our TOEFL course. We go through the question types, discuss the strategies, and then analyze a complete reading section together so you learn how to apply these strategies on the real TOEFL test. This will help you feel confident on the day of the test. You will also learn the templates for high-scoring answers on the speaking and writing sections, important vocabulary for the listening section, and tips and tricks to improve your timing during the test. The link to the course is below. If you need help with your TOEFL preparation, click and join our TOEFL community. Tip number 9, practice with a variety of tests. It is obvious that the best practice tests are the official ones you will find on the ETS website. They are created by professionals and are the closest you can get to the real TOEFL test. However, if you have done them all and still need practice tests, you should choose a few different platforms to use in your preparation. Taking tests on only one platform may either make the preparation too easy for you or make the TOEFL test seem too challenging. So be sure to combine different resources to best prepare for the test. Finally, tip number 10, review and learn from your mistakes. After each practice test, analyze your answers. Understand why you got certain questions wrong and learn from your mistakes. This self-reflection is the key to continuous improvement. If you only take tests, you can take hundreds of them and still make the same mistakes over and over again. Improve your reading speed. One of the most important skills for the TOEFL reading section is the ability to read quickly, while still understanding the content. You won't have time to read each passage in detail, so focus on improving your reading speed without losing comprehension. You can take a free speed reading test on the Outread website. Simply click the Start button, read the text, and then click the Done Reading button. You'll then be asked to answer some comprehension questions about the text. When you're done, you'll see your reading speed and comprehension rate. To improve your reading speed, use the Read Speeder, which is a free speed reading course. It has a combination of quick exercises that can really help you increase your reading speed. Also, just reading a lot really helps. If you have to read 200 pages a day for your university assignments, you'll develop speed reading really fast. I know many students who've developed their reading speed by devouring their favorite books every day. Tip number 2, attempt every question. Don't skip questions without at least trying to answer them. Even if you are unsure, try to eliminate the wrong options and make an educated guess. The TOEFL doesn't penalize you for incorrect answers, so there is no harm in guessing. You should also keep in mind that the questions on the TOEFL are always presented in a specific order. This order makes it easier for you to answer each question. There is a little life hack that I always like to teach my students. If you have 2 questions for the same paragraph, the first question usually refers to the first part of the paragraph, while the second question refers to the second part of the paragraph. So knowing which part of the paragraph you used to answer the first question will always help you figure out where to look for the answer to the next question. For example, let's take a look at this question. It's a factual information question. To answer it, you need to read the first 2 sentences of the paragraph. Then comes the negative factual information question, which also refers to the same paragraph. That means that I will most likely not need the information from the first 2 sentences and should focus on the part that starts with "in the 15th century." Also, the information you get from answering some questions can be really useful in the questions that come next. For example, let's say I answered the inference question about the Venetian Council's decision to use round ships. To answer this question, I'll need to read the entire paragraph and focus on the main ideas. However, the next question is a factual information question based on the same paragraph, so I don't need to read it again. I can find the right answer quickly because I know the text well. Tip number 3, watch out for extreme or absolute words. Extreme or absolute words such as only, always, never, none, nobody, or all can be red flags in answer choices. Such words make the statement very rigid, and in most cases, answers containing such words will be incorrect. So whenever you see them, be careful because they may not fit with the nuanced information in the passage. For example, let's look at this negative factual information question. It refers to 2 paragraphs, which means you always have to find some information in one paragraph and some in the other. I also see that one of the answer choices contains the word only, which makes me think that's probably the right answer. Remember, for this type of question, you should find the answer that's not mentioned. But let's test this theory. How do we approach this question? A student without too much TOEFL reading experience might start by reading both paragraphs. Or they might panic and go back and forth between the options and the text. You can pause the video now and try to answer this question yourself first. The thing is, the previous question addressed the first part of the paragraph, up to the words, "as the costs of shipbuilding rose." Now, we just discussed this situation in tip number 2. This means that the second question for the same paragraph covers the part I haven't read yet, which is just the last sentence. So I'll read it first. After reading it, I can immediately eliminate option B. Then, as I'm reading the next paragraph, I learned that the standards and traditions were running down. Also, work was stretched out and done poorly. This means that I can also eliminate options A and C, because I'm looking for the information that is not mentioned in the text. Option D is the only one left, The text mentions merchants, but we don't know if only a few of them were involved. Tip number 4. Learn synonyms and paraphrases. The TOEFL test often uses synonyms and paraphrases in questions and answers to test your understanding of vocabulary and ideas. For example, if a passage uses the verb to increase, the answer might include the phrase to go up. Along with synonyms, TOEFL also likes to use paraphrases. While synonyms focus on replacing individual words, paraphrases rewrite entire sentences or ideas. My advice is to make it a habit to learn the different ways an idea can be expressed. This will help you recognize the meaning even when different words are used. 2 good exercises to build your vocabulary in this respect are: 1. Create lines of synonyms. For example, let's take the verb to increase. You can find such synonyms as go up, rise, expand, boost, grow, escalate, surge, enhance, amplify, heighten, elevate, augment, intensify, skyrocket, and more. And yes, not all of them are exact synonyms of the verb increase. For example, to skyrocket means to increase very rapidly or steeply. But trust me, it's a good enough synonym for the TOEFL reading section. 2. Take pieces of academic texts and try to paraphrase them. Think about how you can express the same ideas in your own words, using synonyms and different paraphrasing techniques. For example, you can use a different word form. Include, including. Change the word order. Change the active voice to the passive voice, and vice versa, and so on. This is a great exercise. If you do it for at least 3 or 4 minutes every day, paraphrasing on the TOEFL will quickly become a piece of cake. Tip number 5. Extract important information and skip extra details. For questions like inference, it's important to focus on the critical information and not get distracted by unnecessary details. For example, when you see information enclosed in commas or parentheses, it's often supplementary and not critical to the main idea. Train yourself to quickly identify what is important in the text, especially for questions that require you to draw conclusions from the information provided. Let's look at the inference question we just discussed. To answer this question, I'll need to quickly go through the paragraph, focusing only on the main ideas. For example, I can see that the Venetian Council finally allowed round ships to enter the trade. This reduced transport costs. As a result, the prices of spices came to equal those transported by Portuguese vessels. There is a typo in the word Portuguese here, by the way. The increase in quantity drove the price far down. And gradually, Venice's role decayed and it lost its monopoly. So the correct answer is B. Ultimately, it did not restore the superiority in the spice trade that Venice had enjoyed earlier. As you can see, I'm focusing only on the main ideas of this paragraph, ignoring the extra details. Tip number 6. Write down the main idea of each paragraph. As you move from question to question, write a brief summary of the main idea of each paragraph. Don't write a lot. A few words will suffice. For example, you've answered the first 2 questions for the same paragraph, and you see that the third question is about the next paragraph. Before you get to it, write down, for example, 1. Ways to find row words. This strategy helps you to stay focused and track the passage's structure. It will also make it much easier to answer the final prose summary question. Also, by having a clear sense of what each paragraph is about, you can quickly refer back to the passage when needed. Tip number 7. Understand signal words. Signal words such as however, in contrast, for example, and therefore show the relationship between ideas in the text. These words act as guides to help you follow the author's reasoning and organization. Paying attention to these words will make it easier to understand the flow of the passage and to answer questions about the structure and purpose of different parts of the text. These words are especially helpful for insert text questions, rhetorical purpose questions, and sentence simplification questions. Tip number 8. Work on prose summary questions independently. The prose summary question is one of the most challenging questions. It's the last question for each passage, and students usually spend a lot of time on it. This question asks you to summarize the text you've read in 3 sentences. Each sentence should convey the main idea of the text. I often see people who spend 5, 6, or even 7 minutes on this type of question and still cannot find the right answers. So my advice is to do this question first, before any of the other question types. Make sure you only do it when you practice at home. On test day, do this question last as expected. This strategy will allow you to really excel at eliminating the wrong options and choosing the right ones. What I notice is that most students rely too much on the text. Well, the best strategy for this type of question is to learn to choose the right answers without reading the text at all. You may be thinking, how can I answer this question without knowing the text? Actually, it's the lack of the text factor that makes you focus on comparing and contrasting the options given and understanding which of them might be the right answers and which might be eliminated. If you do 10 to 15 questions without reading the text, answering the same question with a good knowledge of the text becomes a piece of cake. I do this a lot with my students, and most of them are skeptical at first. But after a few questions, they start answering correctly and much faster. So trust me, this is an effective strategy. Also, on test day, if you've answered all the previous questions, you already have a good grasp of the main ideas. So again, it's more than enough to finish the prose summary question quickly. Tip number 9. Read the questions carefully. This may sound basic, but it's important to read the questions carefully and try to simplify them. The TOEFL reading section includes a variety of question formats, and most of them require you to have a good understanding of what you're looking for in the text. For example, for insert text questions, read the statement carefully before placing it in the correct part of the paragraph. For factual information questions, read the question and rephrase it in your own words. For example, in this question, according to paragraph 2, which of the following contributed to the decline of Venetian shipping? You need to find out why there was a decline in Venetian shipping. For negative factual information questions, always remember to find the statement that isn't true based on the text. Many students get so excited that they find the option given in the text and mark it as the correct answer, which is a mistake. Knowing exactly what the question is asking will prevent you from wasting time on unnecessary details or misinterpreting the questions. Finally, tip number 10. Always eliminate 2 incorrect options first, even if the question seems challenging. Start by crossing out 2 options that are definitely wrong. The TOEFL is not very challenging. In fact, you'll always have 2 options that are 100% wrong. When you eliminate them, you're choosing between the remaining 2 options, which means your chances of picking the right one increase. By following these 10 tips, you'll build stronger reading strategies and be better prepared for the TOEFL reading section. As you've seen, it all comes down to practice, consistency, and learning how to manage your time effectively during the test. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more TOEFL tips and tricks. Tip number 1 is to determine your listening level, as this is a crucial step in creating your TOEFL listening study plan. To do this, take 2 or 3 listening practice tests from the EDS website and calculate your average score. According to the EDS website, if your score is between 22 and 30, your listening level is advanced. If it's between 17 and 21, your level is like high intermediate. If your score is between 9 and 16, you're at a low intermediate level. And if your average score is between 0 and 8, your listening level is below low intermediate. For those of you whose listening level is advanced, include 2 things in your listening study plan. First, review the different types of questions. Second, practice the TOEFL test regularly to familiarize yourself with their structure and to hone your listening skills. If your listening level is high intermediate, low intermediate, or below, I recommend that you work on improving your listening skills with dictation before attempting to work with different types of questions. We'll talk about how to do that later in this video. Keep in mind that this distinction is based on the idea that your desired TOEFL score is 100 or higher. If your university only requires 80, a high intermediate score may be enough to start practicing with actual TOEFL tests and skip the dictation. Now, tip number 2. Improve your listening skills by practicing dictation. Dictation practice involves listening to spoken sentences or passages and writing down what you hear. This practice improves listening accuracy, concentration, and understanding of sentence structure and grammar. A great resource for dictation practice is the Daily Dictation website. They offer dictation exercises on a variety of topics and levels, including TOEFL listening. For those who have a high intermediate level, I suggest practicing with the TOEFL listening dictation exercises. For those who have a low intermediate level or below, start with short stories, daily conversations, or TOEIC listening, and gradually build up your listening skills before moving on to TOEFL listening. Tip number 3 is to improve your understanding of academic topics and college subjects. The listening section of the TOEFL covers a wide variety of subjects, including science, art, history, social sciences, and education. Unless you attended a high school or college where all classes were taught in English, you may find most of these subjects quite challenging, especially biology or geography lectures. Identify your problem areas and watch videos on YouTube specifically for these subjects. I especially recommend the Crash Course YouTube channel, as they have playlists with multiple videos dedicated to the most common school topics. Watch subtitled videos first to get used to hearing difficult words. A nice bonus: watching subtitled videos will also improve your speed reading skills, which is crucial for the reading section. Write down key vocabulary related to the topic. Later, watch the same videos without subtitles. Another good idea is to watch movies or TV shows that are set in school or college. This will help you pick up a lot of college-related vocabulary, which is also essential for the listening section. Tip number 4. Practice the art of note-taking. Do you know why college admission requires foreign students to have a certain level of TOEFL scores? It is to ensure that they will be able to participate in college life. One of their goals is to test a student's ability to take notes during a lecture. As a result, most recordings contain a lot of information that you won't be able to remember in the end. This makes taking notes quickly and efficiently one of the key skills for passing the listening section. Use the following abbreviations and symbols to help you take notes more quickly, or come up with your own alternatives. For those of you taking the test at home, practice taking notes specifically on a whiteboard with a marker. This is crucial for the listening section, and I cannot stress enough how important it is. Tip number 5, track your progress. Make sure you write down all your test scores to see if you're improving or not. Not only will this motivate you to try harder, but it will also help you to calculate your average score right before you take the test. Also, write down new vocabulary and keep it in one place. This can be a real notebook or notes on your phone. Seeing how many new words you have already learned is extremely rewarding, and keeping them in one place makes reviewing them much more convenient. Tip number 6. Learn to identify different question types. As I've mentioned before, there are 8 of them: gist content, gist purpose, detail, function, attitude, organization, connecting content, inference. It is important to recognize them because the more you understand each type of question and how to approach it, the more likely you are to answer correctly in the listening section. Tip number 7, learn to manage your time. The TOEFL listening section consists of multiple choice questions, which often cause students to hesitate before choosing the right option. However, time is limited. According to the EDS website, the entire TOEFL listening test takes 36 minutes to complete and consists of 2 conversations and 3 lectures, with a total of 28 questions. Each conversation lasts 3 minutes, while each lecture lasts 3 to 5 minutes. Let's do the math. Your total listening time will be between 15 and 21 minutes, depending on the length of the lectures. This means that you'll have between 15 and 21 minutes to answer the questions. With a total of 28 questions, you'll have approximately 54 to 75 seconds per question. During this time, you should read the question and answer choices. Check your notes if necessary, eliminate 2 incorrect answer choices, and select the correct answer. As you practice, I recommend that you try to spend about 50 seconds on each question to learn to skim questions and their answer options. If you can't find the correct answer in that time, randomly choose the correct answer from the remaining 2 options and move on to the next question. Tip number 8. Don't take your eyes off the screen or off your notes. In fact, it is so easy to get distracted while listening, especially when it comes to lectures. To stay focused, don't take your eyes off the screen or off your notes. This sounds simple, but it's actually quite difficult to do, especially when you're stressed. Another way to stay focused is to take notes and listen for transitions and signal words, as they often tell you what is coming next. Tip number 9. Analyze listening transcripts. To take notes effectively, you need to understand the structure of conversations and lectures. Take the time to analyze the transcripts of every practice test you take. This is especially true for lectures, which are usually more difficult to follow. Pay attention to how the ideas in the lecture are connected. Think of yourself as a professor giving the lecture. How would you organize it? What would come first? What would come second? How would you explain a difficult concept to someone who does not understand it? Look for cause and effect and compare and contrast relationships in the transcripts. Pay special attention to transitional and signal words by analyzing their function in the text. And finally, tip number 10. Get professional help. You can undoubtedly do a lot of work on your own and get good results. However, if you need to get a high score or are pressed for time, consider our course Get 100 or above on TOEFL to get the results you want faster and in a less stressful way. Tip number 1. Familiarize yourself with the format. When I say familiarize yourself with the format, I don't just mean the general structure. We all know that you're going to hear 2 conversations and 3 lectures, that you're going to have 5 questions for each conversation and 6 questions for each lecture. What I mean is that you need to truly understand how each lecture or conversation is organized. You need to know what to expect, what questions will be asked, what the purpose of those questions is, what skills will be tested, and so on. How can you achieve that? Through practice and analysis. Don't just go from section to section. Instead, take time to stop, think about the question, think about the structure of the recording, and analyze your mistakes. Once you've analyzed at least 10 lectures and conversations, you'll see huge improvements. After having listened to tons of lectures and conversations, I can now pretty much guess the questions that will follow while still listening. Tip number 2, take notes to stay focused. In the previous video on listening, I mentioned the importance of taking notes, but I often get questions about how to do it, what to include, and whether notes are necessary. Taking notes is a must, but how you do it is very subjective. So far, I've seen 2 types of students. Some write down a lot of information, myself included. Others prefer less because more distracts them. Keep in mind that not taking notes at all is not a good option. Why not? Unless you have phenomenal memory, it's difficult to remember all the details of, let's say, a long academic lecture on geology. Notes help you stay focused and capture important details that can make all the difference when answering questions. Yes, you may understand almost everything or remember a lot, but when you have detailed questions or are asked about tiny details, it's better to have your notes to help you. For example, after a lecture on geology, you might be asked to put the steps of the basal sliding process in the correct order. Or see a question, what factors are involved in the amount of deformation a glacier undergoes? As you can see, it's difficult to remember the answers to these questions, along with a lot of other information if you don't take notes. And remember, the first and most important reason to take notes is to avoid distractions. When you write, You're focused on the lecture. Whereas if you don't, your mind might start to wander by the second or third minute. So yes, notes are important. And yes, you should write a lot. But how much is a lot in your particular case is something you should decide for yourself. If you feel that notes are starting to distract you, cut them down a bit. Tip number 3, work on writing speed. This tip ties in with the previous one. If you find note-taking distracting, it may be because you are a slow writer. In that case, practice speed writing. Note that I'm talking about speed writing, not speed typing. There is a lot of advice online on how to improve this. Some basic tips are to hold your pen comfortably, keep letters small, tall, and thin, and maintain good posture. Also, check out the arm movement method. It's a game changer when done right. Believe it or not, your listening score can depend on your handwriting speed, so it's worth preparing in advance. Tip number 4, recognize main ideas versus details. The lectures are designed to overwhelm you with information, but you don't need to memorize every single thing. This is why I told you in the first tip to really get to know the listening section. Knowing what questions are likely to come up will make it easier to filter out what's important. Remember that even though the TOEFL listening section tests your understanding of specific points, it doesn't go into too much detail. So don't expect questions like, what year did this event take place? Tip number 5, pay attention to tone and attitude. Tone and attitude are important in understanding the speaker's intent. So always pay attention to how the speakers are feeling, whether they're excited, skeptical, sad, frustrated, and so on. I sometimes add these emotions to my notes by writing S for student, frustrated, or P for professor, excited. Also, practice identifying attitudes from subtle cues in speech. This is important because you'll often be asked, why does the professor say this? And then a short part of the recording with the phrase will be played. This is where subtle cues in speech become crucial. Tip number 6, eliminate wrong answers on tough questions. As with the reading section, if you're unsure of the answer, start by eliminating choices that are too broad, too specific, or irrelevant. For example, if a question asks, why does the professor say this? And one choice says, the professor thinks the student's idea is stupid. That's definitely wrong. TOEFL would never make such an answer the correct one. So elimination helps you narrow down your options and find the right answer. Tip number 7, get used to spoken contractions. One of the reasons you often understand transcripts, but don't catch all the details in lectures and conversations, is that native speakers don't speak like this. We met in our house. Instead, they might say, we met in our house. We met in our house. As you can see, that's a little different. Contractions like could've or would've are common in conversations and lectures on the TOEFL test. Recognizing them will make it easier to follow the flow of natural speech. Also, if you're familiar with contractions, your brain doesn't have to work as hard to process the speech. For example, if you immediately recognize there as they are, you can focus more on understanding the overall meaning instead of mentally expanding each contraction. I'm thinking of creating a separate video on contractions and how they're used on the TOEFL test. So feel free to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to not miss it. Tip number 8, study campus vocabulary. This is a must. In my one-on-one lessons, I always teach campus-related vocabulary because it's so helpful for understanding conversations. If you don't know words like major, residence halls, dorms, bunk beds, electives, transfer, credits, and so on, it will be difficult for you to follow campus conversations and even some lectures. So make sure you study this vocabulary and you'll see how quickly your score will change. This is what we do in our TOEFL course. We'll teach you all the important vocabulary you need to know, such as campus-related vocabulary, academic vocabulary, subjects like biology, archaeology, art, physics, and more. Discuss the types of listening questions and what to expect from each of them, and dissect a complete listening section so that you know what to include and what not to include in your notes to feel prepared and confident on test day. We'll also teach you high-scoring templates for speaking and writing, and make sure you get the score you want in the shortest time possible. I'm leaving the link below. click on it to join our TOEFL community. Tip number 9. Listen to different accents. While the American accent is the most common, the TOEFL test may include speakers with British, Australian, or other accents. Check out what they say on the ETS website. The listening section includes native speaker English accents from North America, the UK, New Zealand, or Australia to better reflect the variety of accents you might encounter while studying abroad. You may not hear these accents every day, so find YouTube videos with different accents to familiarize yourself and avoid confusion. Tip number 10. Stay calm during long lectures. I usually have at least 5 one-on-one sessions a day, and most of them are TOEFL related. I've seen hundreds of students, and there are real problems. And believe me, in 60 or even 70% of the cases, a lot of their problems are related to their personal psychology and test anxiety. Once these two issues are resolved, their scores increase dramatically. The lectures in the listening section are deliberately long to test your concentration. As a result, many students panic and miss important points. You should never worry about missing a detail or two. Always focus on the main idea and stay calm throughout. Tip number 1. Study the speaking scoring rubrics. To get a high score, you need to know what the evaluators are looking for. So the best way to succeed in this section is to know exactly what to say and what not to say. For example, some test takers only think about their grammar and vocabulary and completely ignore what they're saying. Others, on the other hand, do their best to give 2 reasons in type 1 question and start stuttering or making mistakes in order to finish on time. There are also those who think that they should give a broad summary of the reading in questions type 2 and 3, or those who think they should not summarize the reading at all. In any case, all these people will never score higher than 23. Even if their speaking skills are very good, there are 3 main criteria you need to be aware of: delivery, language use, and topic development. You need to pass all 3, not just one. This is why I spend a lot of time both in the TOEFL prep course I created and in one-on-one sessions breaking down the speaking rubrics, so that my students have a checklist of things they absolutely need to get a high score. This brings us to tip number 2. Learn time management. The TOEFL speaking section is time sensitive, with only 4 questions to answer in 16 minutes. You have only 15 seconds to prepare for question 1 and 45 seconds to speak. And in those 45 seconds, you have to develop your opinion on a personal question and give reasons and examples for it. For example, you will be asked, do you agree or disagree with the statement that female and male university students should have separate residence halls? Now pause the video, give yourself 15 seconds to think about what to say, and try to give a detailed answer in 45 seconds, giving reasons and personal stories that would support your opinion. Not so easy, is it? So you need to practice managing your time effectively during your answers. Set a mental timer for each part of your answer so you don't get caught off guard. For example, your introductory sentence in question type 1 should be no longer than 5 seconds. Otherwise, you won't have time to go into detail. In type 2 and 3 questions, you have to read the text, then listen to a conversation and a lecture, and then summarize what you learned in 60 seconds. Again, you need to know that you should spend no more than 15 seconds summarizing the reading, and at least 40 seconds giving details from the listening. You cannot effectively stay within the time limit if you don't use templates. Small structures for all 4 of your responses will help you score well and organize your ideas clearly. So tip number 3, start the same way for each question type. Simplify your approach by using the same introductory phrase for each question type. This will reduce the stress of getting started and help you start with confidence. This is why we need effective templates. For example, let's say your question type 1 looks like this. Your degree requires that you should choose a history course. Which of the following courses would you prefer? Art history, 20th century world history, Science history. You only have 15 seconds to think about what you're gonna say. So in order to start confidently, you need to have an idea of what you might say. Of course, you can try to improvise, or you can use a set phrase. I can say, if I had to choose, I would definitely opt for an art history course. This would show the examiner that I can use conditionals. If I had to choose, I would. That I know idiomatic vocabulary, opt for, and that I can successfully paraphrase the task instead of just reading it. Also, I won't freak out about what to say, because whenever I see a question like this, I already know what my introduction will be. It will also allow me to spend more time on my reasons and develop them better. Another example. In question type 2, you will usually read a campus announcement and then listen to a conversation between two students discussing the announcement. You have 30 seconds to prepare, which is not a lot. So, if there is a change being discussed, you can always start your answer by saying, "The reading passage announces a change on campus." And then go on to summarize the reading. Imagine, you're stressed about what to say next, but you can confidently start with a memorized sentence. This will help you sound confident in what you say, which is important on test day, and give you motivation to continue with the rest of your answer. As you can see, templates are critical. Does that mean you cannot score high without a template? No, you absolutely can. But templates make your life a lot easier, increase your score, and help you prepare for the exam faster. Tip number 4, pick the right time and place to study. Avoid studying when you're too tired, especially at night. You'll only waste time and not improve. Instead, find a time in the morning or afternoon when you can concentrate better. 10 minutes of focused practice is much more beneficial than an hour of idling around the questions. For example, what I usually do with my students during our consultations is take a list of type 1 questions and then practice them for about 10 minutes. At first, I ask them to come up with opening sentences for 15 to 20 questions in a row until the skill becomes automatic and they no longer think about it. You should also practice answering questions in a noisy environment, since this is what you might experience on test day. Of course, you can practice in a quiet room first, but then play some music in the background or turn on a podcast to distract yourself. On test day, you may hear other students talking, so it's better to be prepared for a noisy environment ahead of time. Tip number 5, use a timer. Practice under time pressure to get used to the test conditions. It may sound obvious, and it probably does, but you should embrace the timer as your ally. There are students who are afraid of time, so when they see the minutes ticking away, they panic and cannot say a word. You can try speaking without the timer first, and then slowly incorporate it into your practice routine. Look at the clock at least twice during your answer to stay on track. For example, in questions 2 and 3, if you see that you have 40 seconds left, you should move on to the listening summary. Tip number 6, expand your vocabulary. Don't stick to the same set of words. Include a variety of vocabulary to showcase your language skills. A diverse vocabulary not only impresses graders, but also adds depth and richness to your responses. This doesn't mean that you need to stuff your answers with low-frequency academic words that no one uses except in academic articles. Use thematic and idiomatic vocabulary. In our TOEFL course, we have compiled a list of such words on various topics, so you don't have to find them on your own. If you choose to prepare on your own, research topics such as science, study, work, entertainment, environment, and come up with 10 to 15 word lists for each topic. Tip number 7, practice, practice, practice. You know what they say, practice makes perfect. Record yourself responding to various TOEFL prompts. Play them back, identify areas for improvement, and fine-tune your responses. The more you practice, the more comfortable and fluent you'll become. And hey, it's a great way to track your progress. I like to give my students raw scores for each answer they give because it motivates them to keep going. Start with question type 1, then move on to question type 2, and so on. You can also do complete speaking sections on YouTube to simulate the test conditions. Tip number 8, get professional support. Consider seeking guidance from experienced teachers. Whether it's a TOEFL tutor or an English teacher, having someone to guide your studies can be immensely beneficial. You can take our Get 100 Plus on TOEFL course to improve your skills, or use any other professional support out there. The important thing is that you get feedback a little earlier than a few days before the test. If you schedule a consultation the day before the TOEFL test, you will not have time to implement the skills and feedback that you will receive. So allow at least a few days between your consultation and the test. The first tip on our list is understand the structure. The speaking section is already quite intense. So to succeed on test day, you need to eliminate any factor that might make you even more anxious. Lack of familiarity with the structure of the test included. You'll see 4 questions. One is the independent speaking question. And what you just saw is a typical example of it. You'll have 15 seconds to prepare and 45 seconds to speak. The next 3 are integrated speaking questions. They ask you to read, listen, and then summarize what you've learned. Question 2 is often called campus announcement because it'll have a text and a conversation about a change on campus. Question 3 is what I call a general to specific question. You'll have a short text that explains the concept in general words. Then, you'll hear a lecture where the professor explains this concept. Your prep time for these 2 questions is 30 seconds. Your answer time is 60 seconds. Finally, question 4 is an academic lecture that you'll need to listen to and summarize. There is no reading passage this time, so you'll have 20 seconds to prepare. You'll still have 60 seconds to speak. However, when I say that you should understand the structure of the speaking section, I don't mean learning the facts I just told you. Go into more detail. For example, you need to know that in question 2, you'll need to find the main idea of the text and 2 supporting ideas. For example, the university wants to renovate the library because it's outdated and always overcrowded. When answering, combine the main idea and the supporting points into one long sentence. This will save you time, which you can use later to summarize the conversation, and will help you use a complex sentence in your response. You also need to know that the lectures in questions 3 and 4 are usually given in many short sentences, while your job is to summarize them in a few longer sentences to save time. Details like that are extremely important, because if you don't know them, you'll always feel like you're playing roulette, where your speaking score depends on pure chance. Instead, you want to make sure you've broken down each question in enough detail that you can approach it almost mechanically, like a robot. This way, you'll keep anxiety at bay and increase your chances of scoring high every time. Tip number 2, speak clearly, not quickly. A common problem many students have is that they think they have to speak super fast, with no pauses, not a single one. But that's just not realistic. When people try to do that, they end up making things worse by stressing themselves out even more. They get so focused on speed that they end up pausing or stuttering a lot more than they normally would. I've seen this happen a lot. Many of my students begin by telling me about their situation in fluent and confident English. But when the time comes to answer the first TOEFL question, it's as if I'm listening to someone else. Their responses become weak, they make many mistakes, and some may not even finish their thoughts. It's all because of stress, even in your native language. When you're under pressure, you'd be surprised at how much harder it is to express yourself. So don't add unnecessary stress by chasing speed. Instead, focus on clarity and pacing. Even if you speak more slowly, being understood is the most important thing. The third tip is use transition words. I'm not saying you should start every sentence with a linking word. You also don't need to use overly formal transition words like in addition, hence, or nevertheless. But using smooth transitions such as a result, on top of that, however, and for example, can really help structure your speech logically and make it more coherent. Just be sure to practice using these words beforehand so that they flow naturally when you speak. Tip number 4. Remember that note-taking is key for integrated speaking questions. In my private lessons, I always devote at least one session to note-taking because it's so important. Good notes account for about 60% of your success on questions 2, 3, and 4. For example, when you're working on question 2, write down the main idea and 2 supporting points as you read it. Let's say the passage looks like this. Your notes might be: eliminate sculpture classes, not enough students interested, sculpture professor retiring, limited budget. You don't need to worry about grammar in your notes. Always focus on writing down keywords and main ideas to keep your response organized. Also, don't write full sentences. It wastes time. Remember that your notes from the reading will help you predict the content of the listening section. For example, I know that the active speaker in this conversation will first talk about the fact that not enough students are interested in the course, and then discuss the situation with the professor. He or she may agree or disagree, but they will address each point in that order. Speaking of paraphrases, our 5th tip is to practice paraphrasing. To succeed on the TOEFL speaking section, you'll need to rephrase information from lectures and reading passages. You don't have to change every single word in a text or lecture. Just replace some of them. For example, say eliminate instead of discontinue. Think of it more as simplifying the information you've read or heard, or saying it in different words. For example, instead of saying the professor is retiring, you might say the professor is stepping down. The professor is leaving the university. I usually suggest that you paraphrase a little more from the reading than from the listening, because that's the information you can see. However, you can still use some words from the text, especially if they're difficult to replace with synonyms or paraphrases. This won't affect your score. To practice this skill, think of synonyms for all the words you encounter in your speaking practice and daily life. Play a little game with yourself. Whenever you see something or think of a word in English, think of several other ways to say the same thing. This exercise will really help you expand your vocabulary and start paraphrasing quickly. Tip number 6. Work on pronunciation. You don't need a perfect accent, but clear pronunciation is essential. Work on tricky words and sounds that you find difficult. You can also practice on the daily dictation website. If you choose the TOEFL listening section there, you'll see many conversations and lectures where you can listen and repeat after the speaker. The vocabulary used in these recordings is very similar to the vocabulary you'll see on the TOEFL speaking test. So, try mimicking the speaker's pronunciation and intonation, and you'll soon see huge improvements. Tip number 7 is answer questions directly. This tip is especially true for the first question on the TOEFL speaking test. Many students start to go off topic and waste time. Instead, you need to answer the prompt directly and stay on point throughout your answer. This is where TOEFL speaking templates come in handy. If you have a set phrase that you start each answer with, you'll save a lot of time elaborating on your points and will be able to get a higher score. You can find high-scoring speaking and writing templates in our TOEFL course. Try to drill them first. Read each template out loud at least 4 to 5 times to make sure you don't stumble. Then, start practicing. Answer question after question using the template until it becomes natural and easy. This way, no matter what you're asked on test day, you'll feel confident and be able to give effective answers. We'll also take you through complete reading tests and explain how to approach each question quickly and effectively. For example, many students struggle with the insert text question, but there is a simple strategy that will allow you to ace it without wasting time. I'm leaving the link in the description below. Click on it and become part of our TOEFL community. Tip 8. Create extremely long sentences daily. This is one of my favorite TOEFL speaking exercises these days. My students definitely know this activity because I ask them to make sentences like this all the time. Why do you need these sentences? As I just said, the biggest challenge in questions 3 and 4 is that you don't have enough time to include all the details. Therefore, you should use longer sentences that allow you to present many details quicker. This is where words like which, and, So, and as a result, when, even though, while, if, and others come in handy. To practice these, try to create long sentences on a daily basis. For example, take any sentence starter. Let's say, when I graduated from college. Then start speaking. Try to say as much as you can in one sentence without breaking it. You're free to say whatever comes to mind. The main goal is to keep it all in one sentence. You could say, when I graduated from college, I started applying for jobs which took longer than I expected, and I felt discouraged at times, so I decided to take some online courses to improve my skills. And as a result, I became more confident in interviews, which helped me secure a job offer. And when I finally got the job, I realized how important it is to stay persistent, even when things don't go as planned right away. And so on. You get the idea. Using longer sentences allows you to avoid the pauses that are inevitable in between shorter sentences. And that, in turn, saves you time. So, if you have a few minutes to spare, create 2 to 3 sentences like this and see how long you can go. You can also keep up the challenge by making each subsequent sentence longer than the previous one. Tip number 9, read out loud daily. Reading aloud helps reduce pauses and hesitations in your speech. Simply read out loud for 2 to 3 minutes each day. Try to avoid pauses. Use proper intonation and sound as clear as possible. It seems simple, but I'm sure you'll have a hard time avoiding hesitations and pauses at first. As you continue to work on this skill, your reading will become much more fluent, and so will your speaking. Most of my students notice the results within a few days. Let me know how this exercise works for you. Finally, the last tip is learn to recover from mistakes. As you've probably figured out, a big part of your success, about 40 to 50%, comes from staying focused and managing stress. If you stumble, freeze, or make a mistake, quickly correct yourself and move on. Graders value recovery more than perfection. If you start beating yourself up over a mistake, you'll only make more and damage your score. So, no matter what, don't stop halfway through your answer, even if you paused or made mistakes along the way. Trust me, you'll be glad you mastered this skill when the test day comes. These are 10 tips that will definitely help you improve your TOEFL speaking score. Let me know in the comments which ones you already knew and which ones were new to you. For a fun little challenge, try making up an extremely long sentence and post it below. We'll see who can come up with the longest one. If you're currently preparing for the test and want to check how ready you are, click here to have your writing and speaking scores evaluated. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tips and tricks on how to ace the TOEFL test. Tip number 1. Know your question types and scoring rubrics. The TOEFL writing section has 2 tasks, the integrated task and the academic discussion task. The integrated task involves reading an article, listening to a lecture on the same topic, and then summarizing the information you learn from both sources. The academic discussion task is all about your thoughts. You must answer a question posed by a professor and write at least 100 words in 10 minutes, expressing your opinion on the topic. In the integrated assignment, you should select the most important information from the lecture and present it coherently and accurately in relation to the relevant information from the reading. This means that you should first write a little more about what you heard than what you read. Second, organize your response well and make it easy to understand. And third, make sure that your language mistakes don't distract the reader. In the writing for an academic discussion task, you should make a relevant and very clearly expressed contribution to the online discussion that demonstrates consistent facility with language. This means that first, your response should be at least 150 words long, preferably 170, to ensure that you develop your ideas well. Second, you must use details and examples. Third, your grammar and vocabulary should be natural and varied. And then fourth, you should proofread your essay well to avoid grammar and vocabulary mistakes. If you want to learn advanced vocabulary for the TOEFL writing section, get our PDF by clicking on the link in the video description. This brings us to the second tip. Tip number 2, learn to spot your mistakes. This is especially important for the academic discussion task. The scoring rubrics tell us that you should make almost no lexical or grammatical errors other than those expected of a competent writer, writing under time pressure. As examples, they give common typos or common misspellings or substitutions, such as there and there. So, to avoid mistakes, unleash your inner grammar ninja and proofread carefully. I recommend that you proofread your essays 3 times. The first time, check for content and clarity. Make sure you answered the question, provided enough detail, and didn't go off topic. The second time, check for grammar. Look for those sneaky grammar errors, such as articles, tenses, punctuation, and prepositions. Finally, reread your essay to see if you need to make any vocabulary corrections. Of course, time is limited on test day, so you should learn to do this very quickly. To improve this skill, use proofreading tests and quizzes. There are tons of them on the internet. You can use the ones offered by Edit Republic, the Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading, or Grammar Monster. I will include the link to many free proofreading tests in the description below. This is a definite game changer. Like I said, time management is key. So, tip number 3 is stick to the clock. You may be able to write 30 out of 30 essays if you're preparing at home without a time limit. But if you only have 10 or 20 minutes to write something, everything changes. So, pace yourself and plan your time carefully. Spend a few minutes thinking about what you're going to write. Then write non-stop for some time. And spend the rest of the time proofreading what you've written. Proofreading is always easier than writing from scratch. So start writing as soon as you outline your essay and make corrections as necessary. Tip number 4, improve your typing skills. You can practice on the Fast Fingers website, which will also improve your spelling. This is especially important since there will be no grammar checkers on the day of the test, and you'll want to be prepared. Tip number 5, practice until your writing skills become automatic. Writing is a skill, and like any skill, it gets better with practice. Set aside some time each day to write essays. Use the official TOEFL prompts, time yourself, and review your work. The more you practice, the more confident you'll be on test day. You also want to reach a level where you don't have to think about grammar and vocabulary. If a grammar topic is challenging for you, review it until it becomes automatic. You can use grammar books or websites to practice grammar. In our TOEFL prep course, we have an entire lecture dedicated to the most common grammar mistakes students make. It's a compilation of all the little mistakes I've seen in my one-on-one sessions so far that are repeated in every single student's essay. If you want to get a high score on the TOEFL test and your time is limited, click on the link below and join our TOEFL community. For those who choose the Pro package, be sure to prepare your essays before the consultation so that we can score them along with your speaking. Tip number 6, learn collocations, not individual words. Part of the writing criteria is that you demonstrate precise and idiomatic word choice. Writing effectively and naturally depends on your ability to write in chunks. Imagine that you need to use the verb to address in your essay. Are you likely to use it correctly if you only know its definition? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if you know collocations, like to address the problem or to address the issue, you'll have a better chance of using them naturally. For example, the government is implementing new policies to address the problem of pollution in urban areas. Feel free to use the Scale language learning engine, which provides sample sentences, a word chart with common collocations, and synonyms for any word or phrase you'd like to learn. Tip number 7, don't be afraid to make grammar mistakes. Yes, I know I just said that grammar is important and that you should learn to spot grammar errors in your essays. But that shouldn't be your main focus. In my one-on-one sessions, I see many students who only think about grammar accuracy and forget or don't have time to think about anything else. You should know that even though the ETS says that you should have almost no lexical or grammatical errors in your essays, The maximum score sample essays they provide us with have quite a lot of errors. When I was preparing updated lectures on the new writing test for our TOEFL course, I checked the EDS sample essays. And I have to tell you that there were more than 5 mistakes in each short essay. We analyzed all of them in our writing module. For the integrated essays, grammar mistakes are even less important. This assignment is about showing that you can read, listen, and summarize academic information effectively. So yes, you should try to eliminate errors from your essays, but you should also know that it's okay to make some, especially if you're writing quickly. Don't just focus on grammar. Think about vocabulary, and most importantly, the content of your essays. Tip number 8, use templates. As with the speaking section, your writing will be much easier if you use templates. For example, the template for the integrated essay in our TOEFL course is 119 words long. If your essay is 200 words, that's about 60% of your essay. If you write 250 words, the template will be 47% of the essay, which is still about half. It also gives you the structure, so you don't have to worry about the order of the information. All you need to do to write a successful integrated essay is to follow the template and take effective notes while listening to the lecture. Tip number 9, don't write a conclusion. This is another important thing to keep in mind. Many students think that they need to have a conclusion. However, you don't need a conclusion in the integrated essay or in the writing for the academic discussion assignment. You should spend this time proofreading your essay more carefully. Finally, tip number 10, expand your vocabulary by paraphrasing. As you've seen, your vocabulary is crucial to scoring well on the TOEFL writing section. One of the ways to improve it and learn more synonyms for advanced vocabulary is to paraphrase texts. Simply take a portion of an article on the topic you are struggling with and rewrite it using synonyms and paraphrasing. My students and I jokingly call this technique an anti-plagiarism exercise. If you're writing a paper in college and use some ideas from outside sources, you must paraphrase the information from those sources to avoid losing points for plagiarism. Just do this for about 10 minutes every day and you'll see great improvements. It will also help you expand your topic-specific vocabulary. Tip number 1. Avoid unnecessary repetition. Many students get so excited when writing that they tend to repeat the same idea or word a few times. While it's okay to use the same word 2 or even 3 times in an essay, repeating it more than that will result in a lower score. Let's look at part of my students writing for an academic discussion post. I firmly believe that homework is one of the most effective ways to help students improve their study skills. Although students usually attend class and pay attention to the professor's explanations, studies in the field of education show that they truly absorb the knowledge they get in the classroom only when they practice. As you can see, the word students is repeated twice in 2 subsequent sentences. We don't want that. You can use the same word a few times in the essay, but not too close to each other. So think of possible synonyms or structure your sentence to avoid using the same word altogether. Feel free to share your ideas of how we can avoid repeating the word students in the piece of the essay I just showed you. There is a great website that you can use to eliminate repetitive words in your essays. It's called Word Counter. Just paste your essay there and go to the keyword density feature. It'll show you which words are repeated the most in your essay. 2% repetition is fine, but anything over 3 to 4% should be replaced with synonyms or paraphrases. Tip number 2, vary your sentence structure. This doesn't mean that your sentences should be long and hard to understand. In fact, I don't recommend writing overly long or complex sentences. Americans don't do that. Instead, aim for medium length, easy to understand sentences, but be sure to mix simple, compound, and complex sentences. This adds variety and demonstrates a good command of English, and it will make your essay score much higher. Knowing the different types of sentences will also help you avoid punctuation errors. So, it's a double win. In our TOEFL course, we have a lecture dedicated to fixing typical mistakes students make. And punctuation and sentence types are a big part of that lecture. I'll probably do a separate video on complex and compound sentences, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to make sure you don't miss it. Tip number 3. Use formal language. While you shouldn't be overly formal, especially in the writing for an academic discussion task, remember to avoid slang and informal language in your writing. Stick to an academic tone to align with TOEFL expectations. This will also allow you to get a higher score for your vocabulary. I suggest creating lines with synonyms to help you prepare. For example, to buy, to purchase, to get, to obtain, to decrease, to decline, and so on. I'm not saying you shouldn't use the simpler alternatives. In fact, all of them are very welcome on the TOEFL writing section. Just make sure you have the more sophisticated options ready as well. Also, study the differences in meaning. For example, to obtain cannot always be used instead of to get. If I'm giving an example in the writing for an academic discussion task and want to write, I got a coffee on my way to work, I wouldn't use the verb to obtain instead. Saying, I obtained a coffee on my way to work would sound overly formal and unnatural in everyday contexts, like buying coffee. However, if I'm writing about formal or official acquisitions, I can substitute get for obtain. You must get a permit before you can begin construction. You must obtain a permit before you can begin construction. I can also get or obtain data. Get or obtain the records for a project. Get or obtain a loan. If you struggle with synonyms, you can check out our Advanced to Proficiency course. It's designed with language tests, such as TOEFL and IELTS in mind, so it's a great option for those who want to increase their level to ace both exams. In fact, in the first lecture, we'll analyze a typical essay written by a C1 student. Then we'll talk about advanced article rules and get into topic-specific vocabulary for areas such as politics, economics, social media, and so on. We'll also have a few lessons dedicated to synonyms, where I'll teach you how to use advanced synonyms effectively. I'll leave the link in the description below. Feel free to check it out. Tip number 4, paraphrase effectively. Speaking of synonyms, another important factor to consider is learning to paraphrase. When you're writing an integrated essay, you need to combine information from both the reading and the lecture, and organize it naturally in your essay. However, when you refer to points from the reading or a lecture, you should avoid direct quotations. This is especially true for the text. If you simply copy and paste parts of the text, they won't be considered your own words, and you'll lose points. Instead, you should paraphrase to show that you understand the information well and can put it into your own words. To paraphrase successfully, you can 1. Use synonyms. Way, method. Increase, go up. Decrease, decline, go down. Make less severe, mitigate, alleviate. 2. Change the sentence structure. For example, instead of writing, it's good to do sports, you can write, doing sports is good. 3. Change active voice to passive voice, and vice versa. The government should ban violence and bad language on television. Violence and bad language should be banned from television. 4. Add extra information or take away some information. Being friendly is important in business. Being outgoing and friendly is important in business. Or use a combination of several strategies. For example, it's good to exercise regularly. Doing physical activity on a regular basis is beneficial. Tip number 5, use transition words. Again, don't get me wrong. I don't want you to start every sentence with a new transition word. In fact, I strongly discourage it. But sprinkling your writing with words like in addition, however, for example, as a result, or therefore, will definitely improve the flow of your essay and make it easier to follow. Just be careful not to overuse them. And another important thing to keep in mind is to avoid too formal connectors. Using transitions like hence or thus is a bit too much. They work well in academic articles and research, but they definitely won't look natural in a classroom discussion post. Tip number 6, make a plan. Before you start writing either essay, take 2 to 3 minutes to outline what you're going to write. For the integrated essay, think about how you're going to present the information from the reading and listening in a way that's clear for someone who has never read the text nor listened to the lecture. For the writing for an academic discussion paper, focus on planning your response and finding a relevant reason or reasons supported by detailed examples. This will help you organize your ideas and structure your response effectively, because when you start writing, it will be much harder to keep the structure in mind. In my one-on-one sessions, I proofread and grade tons of essays. And truth be told, many of them start with one idea and end up with a completely different one. Tip number 7 is use a clear structure. Part of the TOEFL writing rubric criteria says that your essays should be well organized. This means that each of them should follow a certain structure. The best way to have the structure and maintain it under pressure is to use a template. Templates can work wonders. I've seen them raise student scores from 23 to 26 and higher. They also make sure that some parts of your essay do not contain any mistakes. An example I always like to give is that the template for an integrated essay in our TOEFL course is 119 words long, which means that if your essay is 200 words, the template will be about 60% of your answer. While if you write 250 words, the template will make up 47%. So first, templates help with the structure, because all you have to do is fill in the blanks with the information you've learned. And second, they reduce the number of mistakes in your essay and allow you to produce error-free sentences. Just as we started talking about the integrated essay, here's another super important tip. Avoid giving your personal opinion. This essay is not about your opinion at all. You shouldn't make any judgments about the information presented. Instead, simply summarize the information from the reading and listening materials. Be neutral and don't take sides. Personal opinions are not required for this assignment and may lower your score. Tip number 9, use specific examples in the writing for an academic discussion task. Now, for this assignment, you should be prepared not only to share your opinion, but also to support your points with specific examples. You can use a personal story, or an example of your friend or family member. If you use English at work or at school, consider using examples from those areas. This will allow you to use more topic-specific vocabulary and demonstrate your level. Remember that using specific examples in this task will strengthen your arguments, make your response more convincing, and even allow you to use a better variety of tenses. Actually, the reason I love personal stories so much in the writing for an academic discussion task and in the first question of the speaking section is that they allow us to use a variety of tenses, such as the past simple, the past continuous, the present perfect, and more. Tip number 10, learn common essay topics. While you'll be confronted with a lot of academic vocabulary for the integrated essay, which you can review by watching these videos on our channel, the writing for an academic discussion task usually asks questions on fairly similar topics. So familiarize yourself with these topics and think of words and collocations you can use when discussing each one. What I always do with my students is make phrase lists. For example, if your topic is education, you might make a list: learning outcomes, critical thinking, lifelong learning, retain information, strive for excellence, absorb new material, get students engaged in the process. For technology, you can use with the advent of, transform beyond all recognition, cutting-edge technologies, to be on the rise, data security, user-friendly interface, and more. When discussing environmental issues, you might use terms such as renewable energy, carbon footprint, sustainable development, biodiversity conservation, environmental degradation, and others. These lists don't have to be long. In fact, having at least 10 phrases or collocations for each topic is great. Doing so will help you prepare some examples and lexical items in advance, which will help you write an effective essay more quickly on the day of the test. Finally, a small bonus tip from me: write the integrated essay and the writing for an academic discussion essay, back to back, at least a few times before the test. This can be tiring, so be sure to prepare yourself for the strain. Regular practice under timed conditions will help you build stamina for the test day. That's the end of today's video. Thanks for watching. If you want to master all 4 sections of the TOEFL exam and get a great score on test day, click on the link below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tips and tricks on the TOEFL test. Remember, scoring 100 plus on the TOEFL isn't rocket science. It's the little things you do that make all the difference. As always, I wish you all a stellar TOEFL score. Until next time.